bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm going to call it a world of leaks. We'll get around to that in a little bit. Another big week in things that are prophecy related. When I do this, I assume that you have some knowledge of the scriptures and you can kind of see how this interrelates to the different passages of Bible prophecy. Again, this is sort of my brain as I work through things in the news each week. It's really becoming increasingly difficult to do this. What I'm going to try to do in the future, by the way, if I have some interviews or things scheduled, I'll try to put them in the show notes underneath the YouTube and Rumble videos, so we don't, so we don't waste time or get off track on that. So this is my wheel of prophecy that I've been working on, and it's coming together. You know, I don't really have time to do all the graphics and everything, but it's there's so much going on. It's just absolutely incredible as we live at this time. Now, I personally don't think that the seals have opened yet, but boy, it sure seems like you can hear the hoofbeats. And this is what I talk about each week: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. As we get closer to the end, I think things will crystallize and we'll have a better idea as to how they're going to work out. Right now, believe me, as somebody who knows a lot of guys who teach in Bible prophecy, who write books, who speak at conferences and that type of thing, there's a lot of disagreement about things. And so we'll just have to, we just need to kind of act in Christ-like ways to some of these things. But I get some pretty nasty emails about, well, you think this and you're so insulted. And I'm like, no, I understand where you're coming from. I understand your view. I just don't put any stock in it. I just don't think it's logical or that type of thing. Sometimes I have to say to the people, and some people get really pretty nasty and angry. But we live at this time where all these things are going to be fulfilled. Now I got to jump forward to my slide deck. I have things that I keep building up that I haven't got to. Okay, so let's look at what happened. This was a very, very busy week, and most of the stuff I'm going to talk about is Israel related, though I hope to get into some other stuff towards the end. That I think is very significant, that even when we do a 2-hour prophecy roundtable like we did this past week, we just don't have time to get to everything. But this is the area of the world that everything seems to be focused in right now. It's unbelievable. For example, here's an article from a Jordan newspaper, Al Gad, and I'll say it like a Midwesterner would say it, the proper way, Al Gad, A-L-G-H-A-D. So if you speak Arabic and you have the ability to make your mouth and sounds that I've never had to make in my life, then that's fine. But it's interesting, the title of this is Bleeding Screams, Articles in the Time of the Flood. So this guy who's, I'm trying to remember what he did. He has worked in the Jordanian government. And so he's sort of summarizing all the things that have happened, and it's called Bleeding Screams, Articles in the Time of the Flood. So what does this mean? Well, if you see the picture at the top, you see those arches? That's on the Temple Mount. So this is what's central and core in the Muslim mind, is that this whole thing between Israel and the Muslims, it's a religious war. That's how they framed it, as a religious war. That's why they call it Al-Aqsa flood. Al-Aqsa used to be the one particular mosque on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That has expanded over time, though. The whole area used to be called Haram al-Sharif. A small part of that was the one building, Al-Aqsa Mosque, on the south end of the Temple Mount. But now they call the whole thing Al-Aqsa. Why? Because they're making a claim to all of that land and real estate, because they know that the Jews are interested in building a temple there. There were, my understanding is there were a couple guys who snuck shofars up onto the Temple Mount this week, Jewish guys, and sounded them on the Temple Mount. And people think like that's the first time that's happened since 70 AD, probably, maybe 68 AD, because the Romans laid siege to Jerusalem back in those days. So again, they're treating this like a flood. We're going to wash over the land of Israel like a flood when we invade them. That was the whole idea behind Sinwar. I will talk a little bit more about this, but we have this problem in our government with regard to people. They claim that Israel is our ally, right? You hear that all the time. But what keeps happening is that leaks keep entering into the press about what Israel's planning to do, because Israel will work with its allies to let them know about operations that are going to be undertaken. But Israel's learned the lesson now, the government in Israel, that you really can't trust the Biden administration, because they will leak it to the press, and they have different mouthpieces that they use in the press to get their information out. So, for example, here is Channel 14. That's a very conservative, right-wing channel in Israel, but it's only in Hebrew right now. So they do have a website. Whenever you see a Hebrew or Arabic website, you can open it in the Chrome browser and then click in the address bar up there. It'll allow you to translate it automatically to English. So this is one. This was last Sunday. The leakers of the materials to the foreign media are trying to establish a new narrative. What happens is certain people in our government leak information to media people, and the media people run with it because they're trying to control how things go on the ground. They're trying to create the narrative, and this is what happens all the time. I have a video, an extended interview that a guy named Mike Benz did on the War Room Thursday or Friday. It was really pretty good. Mike Benz Cyber, follow him on X. He's doing a lot of work on how the whole apparatus of these big governments around the world is to control what you see and what you're able to say on social media. And that seems to be contrary to what things like the First Amendment to our Constitution allow or don't allow the government to do. But that doesn't make any difference to the people. So, look, I don't care. I know one person running for president doesn't care about the First Amendment. Okay? Now, I'm not going to say what her name is, but you will see. I don't know. I think I do have a little video of her today. I'm telling you, I watched her interview on Bret Baier the other night, and it was infuriating. I mean, it was. I'm glad I didn't take my blood pressure when it happened, because I'm pretty sure it was up, because it was unbelievable what she said. You remember the exchange? Bret says, well, you say in your campaign that we need to get back on the right track, but your administration's been running things for 3.5 years. So if we're not on the right track, it would seem to be that getting back on the right track would not be to put you in office, or something to that effect. And she goes, well, Donald Trump is a very bad man. You know, that was, and somebody did a mashup of all the time she said Donald Trump in that interview. It was, and I don't, so I'm a lawyer, was a trial lawyer. And one of the things they teach us is if people are not answering your questions, they're probably lying. That's sort of a rule of thumb. And if you take any classes on how to tell if somebody's lying, that's sort of like the first rule. If they're not answering your question, they're trying to avoid it because people sort of have a built-in thing like don't lie. So that's how they get around that built-in barrier that they have. Now, sometimes they just come right out and lie, and you'll see some examples of this. So now they've revealed, okay, the Hamas documents reveal search for allies for October 7th attack. And what I think they're trying to do by releasing these documents is they're trying to show, okay, look, there are things that Israel knew. Hamas was trying to work with other people. Hamas acted alone. Hamas didn't have anything to do with Iran on this particular attack. Iran was not involved at all. Why is Israel so upset with Iran? Because the narrative our government wants to put out is, and I have a little clip later where Tony Badrin is talking about this, about they want to create this narrative that they know how to manage the problems in the Middle East. And it's not militarily, it's diplomats. All these diplomats run around like, I have the answer and I can do anything. So look up Channel 14, New York Times, and you can read about these leaks. Now, I want to, and I don't really have time to go into all the passages about this, because if I went into everything that I want to talk about today, we would be here for a very, very long time. So the good news, now most of this is, there's some good news in the thing. The best good news you'll have is that I'm going to stop at some point and not continue on for the rest of the afternoon. But it's very interesting when we watch the events happen, how they tie into scripture passages in terms of places. So, for example, this was in the Washington Post last week. I think I may have referenced this last Sunday. Once humming city, Lebanon's Tyre is emptied by airstrikes in fear. Now, if you read passages like Psalm 83, you will find Tyre mentioned. And Tyre is significant in this whole war between Israel and Hezbollah, because there was a guy, he's no longer with us. I don't think they've even had a funeral for him yet. His name was Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. He and his family are from Tyre. So now go back and read Psalm 83, knowing that this person who connived and schemed against Israel, his whole life was about getting the Jews, getting Israel, killing Israelis, killing Jews, came from Tyre. You will find in Scripture that Lebanon, Tyre, Sidon, they're mentioned many, probably dozens of times in Scripture. We know that Solomon entered into an agreement with the king, what was his name, Hiram, to get cedars from Lebanon to build the temple. By the way, have I mentioned this before? On the Temple Mount, I don't know if they're still there. There used to be, next to the Golden Gate, the closed up gate on the eastern side of the Temple Mount, which they're trying to turn into a mosque, and may have turned into a mosque. They try to turn everything into a mosque because then they say, well, once we have a mosque, we can never give up that particular land. So now they're trying to put a mosque in the Temple Mount. Another one, they put one underground there between Al-Aqsa and Dome of the Rock, a little bit to the east there. Put an underground mosque, can accommodate, my understanding is 30, 40, or 50,000 people at one time. It's in what area called Solomon's Stables. Now, I don't think they were Solomon's Stables, but that's what the area is called. But on the Temple Mount, there used to be these logs under a tarp, long beams. And those beams were taken from the Al-Aqsa Mosque. There was an earthquake many years ago, and the roof of it collapsed. And so this is how they do things in Israel and ancient cultures is they rebuild with what fell down. So they had these beams, there were 8 of them, and they didn't really know what to do with them. So they set them aside. They didn't throw them away because it's wood. It's good old wood. The Biblical Archaeology Review people went and were able to get samples from those beams. Have you heard this story? This was about 10, 11 years ago. I remember Randall Price told me about this. And there's an article in Biblical Archaeology Review. They took samples and they took them and had them tested. Well, the one thing they found was that they were cedars from Lebanon. 7 of them they were able to date to about 2,000 years ago, which would be the time of the Second Temple. They probably used cedars in the construction of the Second Temple. And they believe that these were cedars that were actually used in the construction of the Second Temple. And there was one of those, though, that they dated to 3,000 years ago, which would have been at the time of the Temple of Solomon, the first temple. So you sometimes find these things laying in plain sight in Israel. That's kind of interesting. So I'm going to sort of review the week. So Tyre has been emptied out. About 1 million people have fled southern Lebanon to go someplace else because of Israel invading into southern Lebanon. And this is what happened in Rafah. We'll talk a little bit about Rafah in just a moment. Rafah and Gaza, people have been moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because you don't really want to live where things are being bombed. And so people have left southern Lebanon. And everybody's having a hissy fit about it, but I don't see any of the same people saying, well, what about the 80 or 100,000 people in northern Israel that have been out of their homes for a year? Do you see a lot of articles about that? You hear about it from people like me who really understand what's going on, and what the goal of Hezbollah has been is to empty out northern Israel. So Israel has gone into southern Lebanon, and they've encountered these people from an organization called UNIFIL. Now, UNIFIL is a peacekeeping force that is in southern Lebanon. So you would say, well, given what's going on in southern Lebanon, they're really not doing a very good job. And this is probably true of most UNIFIL peacekeeping missions. Usually what happens is that the thing that follows them around most is not peace that's made, it's sex abuse claims from local populations. And that's just a fact. I mean, it happens in Haiti, is a big problem, other countries where UNIFIL's operated. So Israel's told everybody in southern Lebanon, get out because we're coming. And they told them in advance. By the way, there was nobody that told people along the Gaza border on October 7th to get out because Hamas was coming. That's not the way, it's the way Israel operates. And so the big question is, how does Israel make the north secure enough for people to return home? A lot of people, I've seen surveys, 50% or so, say they're never going back. It's just not worth it. And if I would highly recommend that you get the Red Alert app on your phone. I've been following it this morning, and it's just been, particularly in the Upper Galilee, Haifa, Nahariya, just alert after alert after alert from drones, missiles, rockets, whatever's coming in, mainly in the north, but they keep moving it further south because why? They want to empty that area out. Remember the poster in Palestinian Square in Tehran? Are you ready for 2 million displaced people in the north? That's what the Iranians have said for months. And so when Iran says that, a good rule of thumb is take them seriously. If they have emptied out that many people And some of these people, their kids are now into their second year of no school. They're trying to make accommodations for them. It's very difficult. They've moved places where they don't have a job. The government's paying to put them up in hotels. And I heard this week that some of them have been told it's going to be a year or two before you can go back, if you're going to go back. A lot of these towns along the north, like Metula, which is in that little sort of thumb area up there, totally emptied out. Tablet Magazine did a good article on, said the last person in Metula. There's one guy who's still in Metula. Kiryat Shimona, which is a little bit further south, the town of about 25,000. It's in that military zone there, sort of above the Israel and to the left of Golan Heights, right there by the military zones closed by Israel. That's 25,000 people. There's hardly anybody there. This is a huge problem. It's devastating from an economic standpoint. People have businesses, they have homes, they have schools, they have shops. And they're now, over a year, they haven't been there because Hezbollah is throwing rockets in there. And now Hezbollah keeps putting them back. And so the question is, what's Israel going to do? How are they going to get this area so people will go back to the north? And the answer is, it's going to be very difficult. Now, there was a UN resolution after the Second Lebanon War in 2006 called Resolution 1701. You can look it up. Essentially, it says no military operations between the Israel border and the Litani River. You can see the Litani River there. And so that's a distance of about 6 to 10 miles, except you'll see up there by Metula, it's less than 2 miles away. And so the question is, okay, so let's say Hezbollah and enemies come 2 miles away from Metula. How many people do you think, given the history of the last year, are going to come back and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to live here? And as Israel has gone into this, they are finding weapons caches, rockets, mortars, missiles. I think in southern Lebanon, they found the largest, if you combined it, it's the largest cache of TNT on planet Earth. Now, some people suggest, hey, maybe we should just have Israel take that stuff and make the bombs we need since the U.S. isn't giving us the bombs that we need. But then the question is, if you go to Litani River and you take all the Hezbollah people out, is that going to be enough, or do you need to go even further north? Some people in Israel think you need to make southern Lebanon look like Gaza all the way to Beirut. And that's about 45 miles. Well, that kind of operation is going to take a while. But they have found, as they've gone through, they've done 700 operations along the Lebanon-Israel border over the past year. They have found Hezbollah installations, weapons, missiles, whatever, in virtually every home in southern Lebanon that they've gone in. They found tunnels that are a couple miles long. Some of those tunnels come to within a couple hundred yards of the Israeli border. So it's just an easy walk. And the goal was, in these tunnels, they have barracks, beds, food. And when they went into some of them, they found the coffee was still hot in the area, which meant that the people that were in there had just fled. So it's a huge problem. And I heard one commentator, I can't remember who it was, but he said, listen, the only solution is to go north of the Litani River with the understanding that nobody can live there. No children, no pets, no farms, nothing. No one can enter. It's a no man's land for a very long time. That seems to be a fairly reasonable solution given the threat that Israel faces. And people get mad. Well, look what Israel's doing. Look, listen, you can't, how would you like it if people were firing rockets and mortars at your house? How long would you stay there? And the common sense answer is we wouldn't tolerate that. Okay, so don't expect Israel to tolerate it either. So UNIFIL in that area, one of the peacekeeping forces is from Ireland, and they've been kind of having these little skirmishes with the Israeli troops. Some of them were injured because Israel knocked down a barrier around their place. But the interesting thing is when you look at these terror installations in southern Lebanon, you look like just up, you can see it on the next hill, is a UNIFIL base for the peacekeeping forces. So since 2006, these UNIFIL people have been sitting there watching Hezbollah arming themselves to the teeth. And then they're acting like, well, I can't believe Israel is like that. So Benjamin Netanyahu, as he would, and by the way, in the polls in Israel right now, he's way up because of the situation. So here's what he said about that.
The charge that Israel deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is completely false. It's exactly the opposite. Israel repeatedly asked UNIFIL to get out of harm's way. It repeatedly asked them to temporarily leave the combat zone, which is right next to Israel's border with Lebanon. In fact, on the day that Israel began its ground operation next to our border with Lebanon, we asked them specifically, please leave this area so you're not harmed. Israel is not fighting UNIFIL. It's not fighting the people of Lebanon. It is fighting Iran's proxy Hezbollah, which uses Lebanese territory to attack Israel. Hezbollah attacked Israel last year without any provocation on October 8th, a day after the Hamas massacre. And it's continued to attack us ever since by launching over 10,000 rockets and missiles at Israel. Hezbollah uses UNIFIL facilities and positions as cover while it attacks Israeli cities and communities. These attacks have claimed the lives of many Israelis, including yesterday. Israel has every right to defend itself against Hezbollah and will continue to do so. We regret any harm done to UNIFIL personnel, and the IDF is doing its utmost to prevent such incidents. But the best way to ensure the safety of UNIFIL personnel is for UNIFIL to heed Israel's request and to temporarily get out of harm's way.
Seems like a reasonable request. So this is a Turkish newspaper. Israel's Lebanon raid echoes Gaza horrors. So the theme is Israel's committing genocide in southern Lebanon. And by the way, there are reports that Israel has taken out a huge amount of the command structure of Hezbollah. They're doing very well. They have lost a number of soldiers, though. I don't know how many. Certainly above 10, I believe, this week. And I have friends whose sons have now been called up to serve in the north. You know, and they're like any parent, they're concerned. So pray for their safety. It's a war zone. So this is the Turkish newspaper. And here's Erdogan speaking this week at a Palestinian conference. And he says this: Israel atrocities show how international powers control the global order. So he's putting out all the anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic tropes himself. This is Erdogan, who wants to reinstate the Ottoman Caliphate. We are ashamed at how the UN Security Council and other international organizations are helpless in the face of Israeli aggression. We have witnessed how Western values are not applied when it comes to Palestine. If you don't protect rights of your own personnel, how can you protect the rights of others? How long will the UN Security Council stand by while our region turns into a bloodbath and Palestinians are burnt alive in Gaza? So here's the simple solution, President Erdogan. Very, very simple. And I will say this, I'm 2 days older than you are, President Erdogan, and so I'm 2 days wiser. And the wisdom is surrender and free the hostages, and it pretty much ends, and withdraw all of Hezbollah back to Beirut and stop this. But they won't. So that's Erdogan speaking at a Palestine conference this week in Ankara.
We're crossing the border into southern Lebanon.
It's an IDF soldier.
See, what has Hezbollah been doing in the villages of southern Lebanon, embedding itself underneath civilian houses, preparing for an October 7th style attack on northern Israel. Taking years to build, these are iron doors that as you go through them, you see further down the tunnels, hundreds of meters, with water tanks and equipment prepared to house those terrorists for as long as they needed. This is nothing like the tunnels we saw in Gaza. Functioning rooms, a bathroom, a storage room with generators. Radwan terrorists could stay here for weeks. This exit is a Lebanese civilian house in southern Lebanon, serving as cover for Radwan forces preparing to invade into northern Israel with the Conquer Galilee plan. This is what the IDF has uncovered in the past days while maneuvering in southern Lebanon. This isn't what you think about when you think about a Lebanese village. The forces found these beds here with food on the table, with equipment, go bags, uniforms, AK-47s, everything ready to go, ready to embark from this bunker, minutes from the Israeli border, into the communities of the north. In houses like this one behind me, ammunition is still being found, AK-47s, PKs, mines, go bags, and uniforms for Radwan terrorists to invade Israel. Explosions are still happening behind us and we're being moved out. But what we saw was just one of the tunnels here in southern Lebanon that Hezbollah has built for years, prepping to conduct a huge massacre on the residents of northern Israel.
Yeah, I think their goal was they would come across through those tunnels, come across the border, take hostages, and kill 1 million Israelis. Many of whom, by the way, would be Arab. But it doesn't matter to them because this is a war. So there was good news this week. Sinwar, the head of Hamas, after Hania, the political leader, was assassinated in Tehran back in April, I think around April the 1st, he became the complete total head of Hamas, political and military wings. He has navigated throughout the tunnel system in Gaza. He has dressed as a woman at times. The narrative is that, he fought like a lion until the end. He was so brave. He will go down in history. He will be remembered for centuries. That's the narrative on the other side. It's 180 degrees different from the facts. So a little bit about the operation. It was, this was front page news everywhere. Jerusalem Post, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Times of London. And then this is Hezbollah newspaper, Al-Akhbar in Lebanon. And they had big sections on him in there. This is Sharq al-Aswad, an Arab newspaper, I think published in London, talking about Sinwar. And of course, they were saying, he's such a wonderful person. At the UN this week, the Palestinian Authority, and I use the term Palestinian because that's what people call them. I know all the ins and outs of the legalities and that type of thing. This is the ambassador for the, quote, state of Palestine, which doesn't really exist, has never really existed, at the UN saying, they're starving people. Well, they've analyzed the food and everything that's available in Gaza, and they found that it's probably not starvation amounts. Now, the problem is distribution. And remember, our government, our great Biden administration, what did we spend? $350 million to build a pier that sort of washed away and never got more than a couple pallets of stuff in there. So, but if the Biden administration isn't helping in some of our disaster areas, consider that maybe a blessing in disguise and let the local people take care of it. Here's another Arab newspaper talking about this. And so this is Israel Hayom, and you can see that they've really decapitated a bunch of people in Hezbollah and a bunch of people in Hezbollah on the right, Hamas on the left. It's believed that Sinwar's brother will become the new head of Hamas, although there'll probably be a power struggle. And it's interesting, I was sort of back and forth with people. They killed him, but they had to confirm it with DNA. They wanted because they had Sinwar's DNA, because he had been in Palestinian prison. They had done brain surgery to save his life, and then he was released in a hostage deal. And why was he in prison? He was in prison for killing Palestinians that he thought were collaborating with Israel and Jews. And by the way, they say his brother is even more radical than he is. So I don't think that this is, and you'll see a lot of back and forth in the chattering class, the diplomats and everything. What does this mean? Is this going to take anything? But you can see the picture here on the right is Sinwar's. This is how they found Sinwar in, here we go. So that's sort of grayed out, blurred and everything. That's Sinwar laying there in the lower right-hand corner. And it was an amazing operation. These were essentially trainees. They've only been in the armed forces for about 9 months. They were on an operation in the Gaza Strip, and they happened to come across some people down in the Rafah area. They then took them out. And so there's, and it's an amazing operation. There's a lot of things. This is Sinwar, by the way. Back on October 7th, they have a video of him that they found. They found a safe around Sinwar with, I've heard like 1 million shekels or more in it, in currency and coins. There's also a picture of his wife carrying a purse in this video. So this is when Sinwar is going into the tunnels because they're doing the operation on October 7th. The purse she's carrying has been pretty much identified as a designer purse that cost $32,000. The suffering that goes on is just terrible, isn't it? So these are like the mafiosos, you know, they're thugs. So they killed Sinwar, and here's Benjamin Netanyahu's statement about that.
1 year ago, Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist chief of Hamas, launched the October 7th massacre against Israel. It was the bloodiest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was the worst attack on the Jewish state since the founding of Israel. Sinwar's terrorists murdered in cold blood 1,200 people. That's elderly people, Holocaust survivors, children. They brutally raped women. They beheaded men. They burnt babies alive. And they took some 250 men, 251 women, men, and children hostage to the dungeons of Gaza. Today, the mastermind of this day of sheer evil is no more. Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. Hamas is holding 101 hostages in Gaza who are citizens of 23 countries, citizens of Israel, but citizens of many other countries. Israel is committed to doing everything in our power to bring all of them home. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice. I also have a message of hope to the peoples of the region. The axis of terror that was built by Iran is collapsing before our eyes. Nasrallah is gone. His deputy Muhsin is gone. Haniyeh is gone. Def is gone. Sinwar is gone. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end. All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future. Together, we can push back the forces of darkness and create a future of light and hope for all of us.
So here's the Times UK talking about this. They found a few guys who were running into this building. They're investigating. They're pretty certain that the 6 hostages that were found shot in the head had been in the region around Sinwar as human shields. but they're investigating that. As Netanyahu says, they want to topple the regime. So they found Sinwar sitting in this chair. Some guys went into the first floor. This one individual went up to the second floor. It turns out that this was Sinwar. They went into the building. They sent a drone in. And this is a picture from the drone shot. This is not bloody or anything, but it does appear that he lost part of his arm there, the right arm. So this is what happened when the drone went into the building where he was sitting. Now, they probably cut some frames out of this, but so they come in and here he is sitting in the chair. Of course, he's hiding behind a mask and everything, how brave he was. So they would not let anybody see him. He does see the drone there, and you'll see what he does. He picks up a pipe or a piece of wood and throws it at the drone. It's him sitting there in the chair. And there's the pipe that he picks up. He'd been in battles that day with other people. That's probably why. It does appear that his arm was shot off or something. There's also, if you look at his body, the corpse is missing, and he throws the thing, and then they cut out. So here's what happened. This is a sort of a further out shot by the IDF. You see the individual on the second floor of the building, and then the IDF takes care of it, and that's where they found the body. Of course, the narrative Tehran Times, Sinwar's storm continues. So everybody's going, the IDF issued an announcement, and again, this is Shia Iran, Sunni terrorist Hamas leader. But what do you always see in these pictures? The Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount. That's the Al-Aqsa flood. So his storm, Al-Aqsa flood, continues. This is the IDF announcement. This is from Al-Akbar. You sort of see the symbol that they use on this. Now, of course, UNRWA, on Sinwar, they found a bunch of things in his pockets, one of which was UNRWA, the UN Relief Works Agency. People, they're helping Gaza. They're just helping the poor people of Gaza that are suffering. Well, in his possession was a ID for a teacher, UNRWA teacher. You can find the videos of this. So this is the UNRWA logo, and they changed it. This is from their Facebook page. You see the logo? This is what it looked like before Sinwar was killed. Now it looks like this. You see this is from their Facebook page. What did they do? They put a black ribbon on it. Why? Because one of their people had been killed. That's the only conclusion that you come from this. I don't know if you know who this Andrew Tate is, the Tate brothers. They live in Romania. They're a big fan of theirs is Candace Owens. They're despicable people. They claim to be Muslims. I don't know if they are. But this is an example of the tweet. He put out a tweet. He lives in Romania. I can only pray for a death as heroic as Yahya Sinwar, brave, defiant in the face of all of evil and dedicated to his life's purpose. He deserves eternal rest. He earned it. Now, one of the people that this is kind of a story that hasn't got enough press, I don't think, is last week they discovered a young lady. She's about 22 years old, 22 to 24 years old. She was being held hostage as a sex slave in Gaza. She'd been sold. She was kidnapped in Iraq or Syria. She's a Yazidi. Remember the kidnapping of the Yazidis, the massacre that took place? She was 11 years old. She was kidnapped and sold into sex slavery. And they rescued her in Gaza last week. They didn't even know she was there. And she's now been reunited with her parents. You can find the videos of that online. In fact, Jonathan Spire in Friday's Jerusalem Post has a very good article about that. Jonathan Spire, Seth Frantzman have spent a lot of time writing and talking about the Yazidis and the horrors that were visited upon them by ISIS She was kidnapped by ISIS, the Islamic State, sold into slavery, and she ended up in Gaza. And there's no connection, right? There's no connection between all these terrorist groups, right? They're all separate. They're all independent, right? So this is, now everybody's like, oh, Sinwar is dead. There's going to be war. This is an editorial from the Times of London. And I don't think that this is, the funny thing is that satire in today's world doesn't work very well. Because the real world is too weird, too evil to satirize. You know, because reality is its own satire. Well, you got him. Was it worth all this? Joe Biden saying to Benjamin Netanyahu. And what did Biden do? They came out and said, take the win, right? So here's an extended clip. This is Sky News from Australia. Her name is Erin Molan, and she's going to do a monologue. It's about 5 minutes long. I think you need to listen to it because she's going to analyze, okay, what do we make of Sinwar? How are people reacting to this? And what did they say about this before? This is very interesting, and I'm going to give, whoever hires people, like conservative news sites should consider her and rescue her from Australia.
But first, in arguably the biggest moment since the war began, Israel has killed Hamas leader, October 7 mastermind, Yahya Sinwar.
We begin this hour with a major development in the Middle East, though, that could change the course of the war. Israel has killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, in southern Gaza.
It wasn't Mossad who got him, nor was it elite IDF fighters. A group of trainees and reservists took out enemy number one. He died as he lived, like a coward, cowering in the shadows, hiding in buildings bombed off the back of his terror raid. It was a drone that captured these shots from his last moments alive. Look at him. He was no freedom fighter. He wasn't leader of any resistance. He was evil personified. He was also weak, so very, very weak. He knew that he was no match for soldiers, no match for an army. That's why he went for women, children, unarmed innocent men, teenagers, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the sick, the disabled. And then he hid, using the bodies of his own people and those he'd kidnapped as human shields. He was no hero, no idol. I don't care who you are or what you believe, but nobody, no government, no religion, no so-called resistance could ever justify his reign of terror. And any attempts to do so, well, they're disgraceful. Prime Minister Netanyahu with this message for those still in Gaza.
To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages.
Followed by this.
And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice.
And after today, well, after this year, find me someone who doesn't believe him. You won't. World leaders, of course, reacted. Our Prime Minister said he was an enemy of the Israeli people and an enemy of peace-loving people everywhere. His death is a significant moment and can be a vital turning point in this devastating conflict. US Vice President Kamala Harris.
In the past year, American Special Operations and intelligence personnel have worked closely with their Israeli counterparts to locate and track Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. And I commend their work. And I will say, to any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this, we will always bring you to justice.
Now, I don't want to put a dampener on what is a very good news day for the world, but come on, we will always bring you to justice? Madam Vice President, you have done everything in your power to stop Israel from doing this. He was killed in Rafah. You told Prime Minister Netanyahu not to enter. In fact, you told the world.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps.
You weren't even present in Congress when Netanyahu spoke of how his country was fighting terror on behalf of all of us. You kept calling for a ceasefire, fully aware that the other side would never stop. So in other words, you demanded a proud nation of good, strong, resilient people lie down and die. You underestimated them, like so many others in the world. You hindered this rather than helped. The president himself, remember, having recently blamed Netanyahu for the deaths of 6 hostages. Have a look.
It's a good day for the world. I called Steve Netanyahu to congratulate him getting Sinwar. He had a lot of blood in his hands. American blood, Israeli blood, and others. And I told him that we were really pleased with his actions. And further that now's the time to move on. Move toward a ceasefire in Gaza. Ensure that we move in the direction that we're going to be in a position to make things better for the whole world.
You honestly could not make this stuff up if you tried. Our own foreign minister, directly to Israel, don't go into Rafah. So to the rest in the West and all of those countries who cowered, just like Sinwar did at the end, this victory is in spite of you, not in any way because of you. So make your speeches, say all the right things, hail the death of an evil terrorist, take credit if you must. But know within how you enabled him. You encouraged him, allowed his reign of terror to go far longer than it ever should have. Every single person who failed them.
Well, you can find that on Twitter, a lot of places. So I think, I don't run political campaigns, but I think one party should be playing this as a political ad by the hour. By the time, play it. She's a very smart lady, very wise, seems to have a pretty good sense of morality. I noted that the foreign minister's name from Australia is named Senator Wong. I think she dropped the R before she ran for office because it was just a little bit too obvious. And don't think that this is Kamala Harris. So she was encountered by somebody complaining about Israel at a campaign rally, one of these terrorists. They're all well-funded. I mentioned Ryan Morrow's great work on unpacking them. Listen to this exchange that took place. I think this was in Pennsylvania yesterday.
Right now, I know what you're speaking of. I want the ceasefire. I want
about the
justice to be
genocide?
done. I want the war to end.
What about the genocide?
And I respect your right to speak, but I am speaking right now.
Billions of dollars.
So-
2,000 people dead. 19,000 children are dead. 19,000 children are dead.
Now here, listen to what she says.
So, listen, what he's talking about, it's real. And so that's not the subject that I came to discuss today, but
Okay, so she said it's real, it's genocide. People, if she wins, we're under God's judgment. There's no doubt about that, okay? So we've got 2 weeks and 2 days to go before we begin to find out who won, I think, or I don't know what's going to happen. So foreign affairs, Sinwar is dead. Will Hamas survive? Yeah, Hamas will survive. And they go through a lot of articles and analyses and that type of thing. I'm going to recommend next Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern. This will be on Israel 365 YouTube channel. The link to it is there at 10 a.m. Eastern. It'll be the Middle East Summit. General Miravivi, Ambassador David Friedman, Carolyn Glick, a bunch of other smart people from Israel will be going to talk about, okay, what's the way forward? How do we do this? How do we achieve peace? So you might want to watch that. So here's sort of a summary of what's happened the last few weeks and what people hope will happen. This is a big thing. By the way, I don't know if you saw this. This came out last Sunday that they've now done DNA on what they're pretty sure is Christopher Columbus's body. It was buried in the Caribbean and then moved to France and moved back and everything. But they think they've tracked that he was probably a Sephardic Jew. It's kind of interesting. And because he came in 1492, right? That's when the Jews were kicked out of Europe by Queen Isabella. So this is Jerusalem Post today. Good article by Seth Frantzman about here, why is Hezbollah having more success? And what happened? What happened, well, I guess it was just in the last 24 hours. A drone hit Netanyahu's, either close to or Netanyahu's house in Caesarea. And so Seth has a good article. Why are they having more success with these drones? It's a big issue. How do you defend against them? Because they fly very low, they're hard to pick up on radar, and they're getting better and better. And some of them are not as noisy as they used to be. They're actually battery powered. This is from the Ayatollah Khamenei's website. Zionist regime won't last long. You see the symbols, the Star of David and the hourglass going there. And then this is what Iran is saying. Okay, listen, this is what you should expect from Iran. We have underground bases. With the big dramatic music and everything. But look at the size of this place. I think those are pretty old aircraft, but they have missiles, tunnels. It'll take some big bombs to take those out. The missiles and drones are a bigger deal. So that's what Hezbollah is planning, or not Hezbollah, Iran. Let's see the symbology there. And by the way, Iran is down one helicopter. Remember that from a few months ago? They lost a helicopter. So this is the square in Tehran where they put up these posters. And it's an interesting poster. Look at the picture in the background. You have all these missiles and rockets raining down on Israel. And what do you see in the middle of that poster and near the bottom? The Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount. And I've contended for a long time, maybe some AI targeting thing will pick that up and say, hey, maybe we should take that building out because it seems to be important to them in the center of everything that they talk about. So maybe we ought to just put that in the targeting thing for their missiles and take out that building, which would solve a lot of problems. But in the message at the top is in Farsi, Persian, and the top line says Hezbollah is women, and then the other lines say this: if you want war, we are masters of war. Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth, and this is the beginning of the story. So you see this thing about the narrative. This is what the people are fed all the time in Iran. Our people, a lot of people in our country are fed this, oh, Israel, you got the guy, you got Hezbollah, you got Nasrallah, now you got Sinwar, you got some of the other command. Take the win. Just take the win and make peace. But how do you make peace with these people that are bombing your cities every day? And then they threw something into Netanyahu's home, a drone. Here's somebody who made a comment about this on TV, about what he thought about what happened.
Big mistake. איראן באמצעות הפרוקסי של החיזבאללה עשתה היום טעות קשה, שהם ישלמו על המחיר. להערכתי אגב, אחרי המחיר הזה שהם ישלמו, הם יצטערו על הרגע שהם למדו להעיף טיסן, לא כל שכן כדור.
They will regret learning to fly a kite, let alone an unmanned aerial vehicle, a drone. That's probably a good statement. But these leaks continue. Jerusalem Post this morning that attack plans were leaked by our government to the world. Why? Because they're trying to control the narrative. They don't want Israel to respond. And some of these I've seen the documents, they're pretty detailed as to exactly what the targets were and that type of thing. Now, look, the U.S. did something amazing. They took B-2 stealth bombers, flew them from the U.S. to Yemen, and dropped tons of bombs on Yemen to take out some of the terror structure that's there. Because they have 20,000 fighters or so, and they're just causing a lot of problems in the Red Sea. But then I saw an interview with Amos Hochstein, who, by the way, served in the IDF, is now in our State Department. He's sort of our energy czar in the State Department. He's the one who forced Israel this great maritime deal. You know, they're going to give some of this gas to Lebanon, that'll help peace. And he runs around saying, oh, you know, there are 13 areas, just give those to Hezbollah. Well, I mean, give them to the Lebanese government. There is no Lebanese government. There's no functioning Lebanese government. And the people in our government go right along with this. And I think the response of one of the other candidates for president is, look, Prime Minister Netanyahu, do what you need to do. Get it over with, get it done quickly as you can. But so these, by the way, there was like a 30-hour round trip, refueling them the whole way to fly all the way from the U.S. to Yemen and back. It's a very big deal. I think part of this was to show Iran, hey, look, if we're going to be brought into this on behalf of Israel, we can get you from the United States. We can fly our aircraft that fall. That's why Israel's been bombing things in Yemen, because it's further to Yemen than it is to Tehran. So they're saying we can fly, we can get our aircraft there and back. Tony Badrin, I mentioned this article a couple times, the Ottoman Empire, Ottoman American Empire. Why are we doing this? Why are we so intent, our government, on helping Iran? And this has been true for decades in our government. And part of it is, Tony Badrin's theory is that the Ottoman Empire was sort of viewed as the sick man, and Europe used to fund them, help them out, the Turkish government, and they tried to make these provinces. They thought they could manage all the conflicts in the Middle East, like, okay, well, you have this little part, but you can't get too powerful, and you can have this part, but you can't get too powerful. And that's, in his theory, is this is what the American government does. He was on Carolyn Glick's show this week. Here's about a 3-minute clip from that. You should go get the whole thing, JNS, Carolyn Glick show. Here you go.
Okay, one last question for you. Why? Why do the Americans want to feed this beast? I mean, it is so obviously genocidal. It is so obviously evil. Why? Why are they doing this? Why are they stupid? I mean, is this some sort of just, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil? Or is this part of a nefarious thing? I mean, when you look at who these people are and what they storehoused, what they were poised to use against just hundreds of thousands of Israelis and more. What are they thinking? How can they be thinking that you can get to a ceasefire at any time? Why?
It's too late in this episode. This has to be another episode to discuss this. We've discussed it before, and it's the question that everyone keeps asking. So why did Barack Obama do that? Well, I think this is a conversation to be had in a separate episode. But in terms of the handling of the ceasefire or the status quo between Israel and Lebanon or Israel and Gaza, I outlined several months ago, in August, I think it was, or late July or August, it doesn't matter, a piece in Tablet magazine called The Ottoman American Empire. And in that piece, I say that the paradigm that the administration is following is that resembles or has elements in it of the Ottoman structure of the Levant, which is that you have these special provinces in the Levant, right? And the vision of Barack Obama's alignment with Iran
Notice who
as
always
the
says who's
stand-in
in
for
charge.
the Ottoman Empire in the
Barack
21st
Obama.
century. The late Ottoman Empire, the weak, decrepit Ottoman Empire, is that the U.S. is going to treat the holdings of the Iranians in Gaza, in Lebanon, as special provinces that they jointly basically administer. And for that to work, Israel's sovereignty has to be diminished as well. Israel's sovereignty has to be reduced to that of a province as well, which means that Israel's capability to address its own security has to be mediated through the Americans, and whatever problems they have with the Hezbollah province or the Hamas province, all of this has to come through the United States. That basically would interject itself in the same way that Amos Hochstein has been interjecting since 2022, which is to say, we handle it, we reach an agreement with the Iranians, and you sit down. So the principle is the Iranians, Israel and all of the Iranian holdings are down here, a second tier. That's the vision that Barack Obama has for the Middle East. As to why, I can't get into that now. I think we've spoken for over an hour, but we're happy to pick it up in a future episode.
So you can sort of see Carolyn's exasperation. It's like, why are they doing this? And what does Tony Bodrin say? By the way, he's Lebanese by birth. He says, because the Barack Obama's vision for everything. So Hochstein worked for Obama. Biden worked for Obama. That's why I've called it the Biden administration for many, many years now. And that's his vision. And remember, Hochstein did that maritime deal I mentioned just a minute ago. Going to give some of these gas fields to Lebanon. They'll drill, they'll get their own energy, and everything will be good. They'll have money flowing in. They'll have power. They'll have, well, what do they have? They have no power. The utilities are shut down. Everybody's running on a private generator. There's no effective government. They haven't had a prime minister for over 2 years. And by the way, they're drilling out there. A French company, seems kind of ironic, a French company called Total Energy has been drilling in this area where, like on the other side of the maritime border, Israel's getting all this gas and all this stuff to power desalination plants and enough gas and everything to run Israel for 500 or 600 years, they say. And what do they do when Lebanon drills? They get sand and water. I think at this point, there's would be appropriate to point out that at times there is divine intervention in these things. And I don't think you can explain it in any other way. So let's look at some other wars, rumors of wars. China did a big, huge military exercise off Taiwan. Russia's been moving big missiles around, nuclear missiles. They're threatening people all the time. This is kind of an interesting article. This is from, I think it's the Wall Street Journal. Ukraine expands use of drones in warfare. This is a big deal. Seth Fransman wrote a book on drones a couple years ago. I think he was way ahead of the curve on this. And so it says here, with fewer troops and resources, Kyiv uses tech to combat Moscow's might. And so they're using their drones. This was another article, I think this is in the New York Times, Rise of the Dragons, fire-breathing drones duel in Ukraine. And they have this kind of very interesting thing. And so Ukraine's building all this stuff, doing as good as they can. But then what's Russia doing in Ukraine? North Korean forces are backing Russia inside Ukraine, officials say. Also, this article in the Jerusalem Post this morning, they have Russian passports, Russian military uniforms. Their North Korean soldiers, probably 20 or 30,000, are in Ukraine now fighting on behalf of Russia. I hope you get the scope of this, that this is like the looking into the abyss of a world war. We're like right on the edge of the abyss. So Ukraine's been very innovative. They've been using these things called hedgehogs to outsmart Russian tech. And this is from the Times of the UK this morning. It says, although the industry in Britain can take years to develop drone and counter-drone technology, Sorik says that in Ukraine, they're having to create new technologies every few weeks to keep pace with the Russian development of novel weapons. When Army chiefs at the Ministry of Defense in London discuss the Ukraine conflict, they refer to, quote, the war of one-day ideas. So when I talk about acceleration of how these things are going to happen with technology and everything, and AI in the sense of using technology to develop these things, weapons that make it to the front line, it says in this article, do not last long before the Russians work out how to destroy them. The same goes for the Ukrainians, who are developing new defensive measures so quickly that Russia is having to constantly reinvent its technology. The day of one-day weapons, the war of one-day ideas. Very interesting, particularly when you look at it in a prophetic context. And this is Seth Frantzman, as I said. He wrote a good article on drone technology, how Hezbollah's drones evaded Israel's air defenses, and it's kind of a technical article. Front page Jerusalem Post, you can get it on the Jerusalem Post website. It's called Why Hezbollah is Having More Success. Seth Frantzman, and this is a picture of Netanyahu's home. You can see the drone hit the bulletproof glass. Israel's got some problems, though. Their store of anti-aircraft, anti-missile weapons is being depleted, and that's a big concern. So some people say, well, why haven't they done anything with Iran yet? Well, what if Iran launches 600 ballistic missiles this time, which they have the capacity to do that? How does Israel deal with that? And if some of them, they appear to be, maybe could be hypersonic, which fly very fast, can be controlled and get around the air defenses, it's a big problem. But what do you see? European Council has these conclusions that they came out in this report early this week, following the tragic anniversary of Hamas' brutal terrorist attacks on 7 October. The European Council condemns once again in the strongest possible terms unjustified acts of violence by Hamas. But we already had a call for immediate ceasefire, release of hostages, and enduring into hostilities. And then they go into this is the solution, condemn escalation in the West Bank, and then they have their ultimate conclusion, which is what? What do you think? What do you think these European diplomats came up with? The European Union there in the middle will actively support and engage with international partners to do a two-state solution. I'm not going to play this clip. This is Yishai Fleischer, who lives in Efrat, works in Hebron, and this is General Amir Avivi. And both of them, they were talking, and I'll just summarize it for you. You can go to Yishai Fleischer's YouTube channel and watch the whole interview. It's probably 30 minutes long. But General Avivi makes a very good point. Well, maybe I can fast forward through this and play this. Hang on a second. Here we go.
Israel there. We killed more than 7 Samaria is a front that we need to deal with.
Here we go.
Just the fact that there's this channel. But how are we going to deal with some of these problems that we've let fester for a long time?
So I think that talking mostly about the ground forces, we'll have to continue fighting until we win decisively on all fronts. Judea and Samaria is a front that we need to deal with. But we understand that while we're on the offensive there, we killed more than 700 terrorists. We apprehended more than 5,000. We are doing the job, but with the amount of forces we have many, many forces in Gaza and in the north. We're more focused on Gaza and the north than Judea and Samaria, although we are continuing to do the job. When we'll finish with Gaza and the north, we'll really have to concentrate our forces in Judea and Samaria and dismantle completely this infrastructure. Now, looking at Gaza, I think...
So what Amir Avivi goes on to say is, I'll summarize. We can never leave Judea and Samaria. We have to move thousands and thousands of people in there. We have to settle there, that type of thing. By the way, Yishai and his wife, I believe, were living in a place called Gaza when they were forced to evacuate their home in 2005, with pressure from the Bush administration on Ariel Sharon. Another thing that's heating up is Syria. And so here's somebody who writes about Syrian. I love his graphics. And what do you see there? You see a tank with a Russian flag, because Russia has been in Syria now for 11 years at least. And the question they ask in this article, I think it's JUSOR think tank, is like, what's Russia accomplishing? And now there's word that Russia's having trouble with one of its regions that it's controlled very strongly lately. It's the region of Chechnya, which is Islamic. And I've said this for decades. Is an Islamic problem a reason that Russia might be drawn into the Middle East? Is that another hook in the jaw? Because what would calm the Central Asian republics down, the Chechen rebels down, and Putin is friendly with Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen. He's this brutal dictator, very similar to Sinwar. If you don't like you, he'll just take you out. And so Putin has made his peace with him, but Kadyrov has to control the rebels that work with him. This is a big article in Al-Akbar the other day about Unit 8200, that's the cyber unit of the IDF, about how they put people into the press to control the narrative. Everybody's talking, everywhere you go, it's talking about controlling the narrative. And we're getting a pretty good weapon system called THAAD, T-H-A-A-D, to help Israel defenses. But I think we're only giving them one, and don't know if it will be operational that quickly. This is an article from Mark Milley, who was, I think, Joint Chief of Staff, head of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under the Trump administration, and Eric Schmidt is one of the founders of Google, about America isn't ready for wars of the future. And you kind of get an idea what they're talking about. You have weaponized animals, drones, cyber, all this stuff. This is what's coming. Big article in traditional defense firms won't design the next generation of small, cheap drones. Who will do it? Well, Eric Schmidt. It'll be private companies like Google, like Palantir. Okay, I'll do this very quickly. This is a big article, new article in something I've talked about for a long time, which I think plays in end times Bible prophecy, the age of depopulation. Populations across the world are collapsing. So there's a big article it's on the new issue coming out in a couple days of Foreign Affairs. And they're saying we live in the age of depopulation. Now, that's what a lot of globalists want. But now some of them are going, well, maybe that's not such a good idea because it's going to cause problems. People are getting older. Here's a graph of birth rates. So the gray line at the top, you see that's sub-Saharan Africa. You get down here, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they're collapsing. 2.1 is the replacement. That's just to stay even. And look at some of these statistics. This is China, 1.4 billion people right now. But look what happens here on the right. And by the way, they go out to 2100. The good thing about talking about 2100 is I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be here for that. But this is unprecedented. Other than in an era of the plague, this is unprecedented in human history. Here's Iran. They're in decline. In fact, this was in the Iranian paper. Sub-replacement fertility has even come to North Africa and greater Middle East. It says here, despite the pronatal philosophy of its theocratic rulers, Iran has been a sub-replacement society for about a quarter century. So if you're an Ayatollah, you know this. You know that your country is in decline. And if you're going to have your country do a legacy, you have to do it when? Sooner rather than later. Because later, there may not be enough people. And this was an article, July 16th, 2020, in the Tehran Times. That's an Iranian publication. And it says here, fertility rate in Iran drops by 70% in 30 years. The fertility rate in Iran has dropped by 70% over the past 30 years, which has been the highest decline in human history. The Ayatollah knows this. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard knows this. Benjamin Netanyahu knows this. Erdogan in Turkey knows this. So there's a lot of stuff in Daniel 7:8 and that type of thing about future wars that I think are going to become apparent. This is Japan. So Japan used to be 130 million or so, and it's declined. It'll lose 2 million people in population this year after losing 1 million last year. And look where it ends up. By the way, if you take that out to 2100, Japan projected population, 15 million. That's less than half the population of Tokyo is today. What do you think is going to happen to real estate values in Japan? Here's Russia, decline. Here's Ukraine. Look at the decline in Ukraine. Peak of about 50 million, down to about 11 million by 2100. That's what a lot of these wars are about. And by the way, if you dig into the numbers here, what you'll find, like if you go back to China, this is at populationpyramid.net. You can get all these graphs and charts if you want to geek out for a few hours, just play around with the numbers. But hover over these numbers, these bars, men on the blue, women on the red, and you'll go to like India. And what you'll find in India is you'll find like, of this age today, they're like 7 million men. There are 3 million women in that same age category. And wait a minute. What are those 4 million guys or 3 million? And this goes through many age categories. What are they going to do for a spouse? What does that impact? What do you do with males who don't have an opportunity for a spouse? Maybe send them to war? And this is true all over the place. But India and China are by far the worst. There's one country that will do well. Population will double. That's Israel. Now, let's see, who's this? By the way, they always talk, I didn't get a chance to compare the numbers, but they always talk about, well, the Palestinians will just outpopulate Israel. Not going to happen. Carolyn Glick's book, The One-State Solution, dealt with the demographic issue very, very well. But so we live in an age of depopulation. Future labor forces will shrink around the world because the spread of sub-replacement birth rates. And so what's the answer for the elite? Immigration. We'll have immigration. So people like President Trump. By the way, I don't know what questions Kamala Harris was responding to when she talked about the border crisis in the United States. It appeared that she was in some different dimension than Bret Baier on the Fox interview. Trump's trying to deal with it. Giorgia Meloni and France or Italy is trying to deal with it. But guess what happened? The court rejected her plan. She was elected, they weren't. And then this is concerning AI, the new bioweapons, how synthetic biology could destabilize the world. Oh, yeah, because it's so stable right now, right? Assisted dying is growing all over the place. There was a guy, he'd fought in a war, he lost an arm. He didn't have his legs or arms. So he went in to get new prosthetics or something in Canada, and they said, well, have you considered assisted suicide? There was somebody else, she had cancer. She went in, oh, have you considered assisted suicide? It's crazy. AI, they're developing nuclear technology. Thought I'd bring this up. Saudi Arabia's mega project NEOM is using, now they've rolled it back a little bit. Some of the projections were a little bit optimistic, but currently NEOM construction is using 20% of the world's new steel. And this one says that it's the world's largest consumer of steel and is projected to remain a major customer of construction materials, including cement and elevators, for several decades to come. It also makes up 5% of the global logistics market. You're not hearing a lot about it. I mean, I just think it's happening. It's still being built. They've rolled it back. And you see some of the pictures here. It's pretty amazing. Drought. Amazon is drying up. Big article in the Times today about gender's medicine. They've actually, National Health Service in the UK came out with this report that, it's probably not a good thing that we're giving these things to sterilize kids, puberty blockers and that type of thing. But what happened? The Doctors Association pushed back and said, well, we can't, no. And so somebody unpacked it. I saw a study this week where they have about, it's like $150 million in 10 centers in the United States they've brought in, including Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Boston Children's, and other places. I haven't talked a lot about this, don't have time today. The Pact for the Future, I'll be talking more about that in the future. Digital currencies, digital yuan is coming. This was a big meeting this week with Putin. And I always laugh when people say, oh, he's having cancer, he's dying, he's not. And he goes to these conferences and he'll be on stage for like 3 hours. And I watched the whole thing, fast forward through it. I don't think he even gets up and goes to the bathroom. It's amazing for a guy 72 years old. But BRICS, this is a conference he did at the BRICS. We're doing a multipolar world. Want to introduce a new currency. There's some thinking that the BRICS meeting, which starts Tuesday, I think, in Turkmenistan, this was in Moscow, but this is sort of like a preview of the BRICS meeting. They've come out with a thing called BRICS Pay. They'll be having a meeting this week. We'll try to talk about that next week. And the big thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to control the narrative. I want to play just a clip. I will finish with this. I will skip the Mike Benz thing since that's about 12 minutes long. Somebody asked me once, how many times do you practice these things before you give them? And I'm like, you kidding me? I'm putting it together while I'm running one clip, I'm putting another one in. This was World Economic Forum had a meeting about a week and a half ago. Here's John Kerry. What I know, trigger warning, but you need, because this is how the administration thinks. This is what he had to say.
Perhaps Secretary Kerry and the panelists could expand on the role of tackling climate misinformation on the solutions in the marketplace, because that seems to me that it's rife out there, both from business, investment, and consumer.
It's so tough. Everybody's wrestling with that right now. And I think the dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and that people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. Look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what you need...
So the First Amendment is a block to free speech. And Mr. Kerry, the reason why people reject your ideas is because they don't work. And and people are finding out that they don't work and why they don't work and why they're a lie and why they're false, because it's very easy to check. It's very easy to be your own fact checker. So to show to you that I am a man of grace.
There should be a lot of things done.
I'm not going to play this. Thank you very much. Add extra likes and thumbs up and everything to the subscribe and all thing on the YouTube channel. And she says this free speech thing is way overrated. So, lots to talk about. Anyway, as I said, if I'm involved in some things this week, I'll try to put those in show notes or on my social media and that type of thing. Thanks for listening. Listen, do you think that it's kind of a chaotic world? Destabilized? Like, I love that article on Foreign Affairs. Biological weapons could destabilize the world. Oh, really? I had not noticed that. So eventually they'll catch up with us, right? So look, I talked about Israel, did the sermon first hour. If you want to listen to that, you can go listen to that also. Let's pray. Lord, hang on a second here. Hard to pray when she's staring at you. Lord, thanks so much for your word. Thanks for the blessing that it really is to live at this time. Pray that you'll help us to take this information, synthesize it, understand the situation that we live in, the gravity of the situation, help us to prepare, be wise, and give us opportunities to share the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ with those around us. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.